Radio Free Skaro!
Hello everyone, welcome to Radio Free Skaro, episode number 784. I am Stephen at Edmonton, continuing the Tales of Gallifrey One with a trio of interviews from 2012. All of these interviews appeared on the same episode of Radio Free Skaro back in 2012, that weekend episode number 298, if you're keeping along at home. Three interviews with three very notable people in the history of Doctor Who. William Russell, Waris Hussein, and Philip Segal, the latter, of course, being the executive producer of the 96 TV movie. So enjoy this dip back in time to almost 10 years ago for these trio of interviews, starting with William Russell, where Ken Deep and I sat down with him in the hallway. I recall being set up in the hallway, right in between the green room and the main stage that year, and this is why we could get three interviews in one episode, because they were right there. We ambushed them as they came off stage or were about to go on stage. So it was a grand time, and hearing, just being in the presence of William Russell. That was his first appearance at the Gallifrey One, and someone had given him a Chatterton ribbon, as I recall, explanation, because of course that's what William Hartnell or the Doctor called him in one episode back in the 60s. He really seemed to revel in the convention experience, and speaks on that and other things regarding his time on Doctor Who in this interview, which you will hear right now. I'm here in the green room with my good friend Ken. Hello, Ken.
And I'm with my good friend Stephen.
And we are here with the legendary William Russell, Ian Chesterton, Knight of Jaffa himself.
Thank you.
The fact that I could actually call you that from an episode from almost 50 years ago.
Very near 50 years ago, yeah. Right.
It's quite
That's
something.
Right, yeah.
I mean, this is your first experience at a convention like this. Are you...
This size.
This size, certainly.
No, it's
No?
my first.
You...
No. I went to a convention in Chicago in '93, and sorry, I'm still in the last episode. Yes, no, I mean, I knew what happened in conventions, but I had quite right that I haven't been to many.
Right.
That is true. It's true.
But what was your reaction to the overwhelming positive reaction that you got, especially on the Friday night when they introduced you for the first time?
Well, I mean, I was very I was very delighted. It was very gratifying. I mean, they were talking about things that I'd done 50 years ago. You don't often get a chance to expatiate on things you had done 50 years ago, but it is one of the sort of strange things about Doctor Who is that when it sort of comes back and you really start to think about it, and you remember things and enjoy things that happened then. Mm-hmm. So I've always just, in a sense, as a working actor, enjoyed my job. I've always enjoyed it, so I continue to enjoy it when I'm doing this.
There's a sense when you watch the episodes that you really did enjoy it. I watched the Romans last night.
Oh yes.
Back in my hotel room,
yes.
And I watched your interaction with
Bill
and with all the characters, and there's just a genuine sense of liking each other, of enjoying what you were doing, and being sincere about it. And I think that's probably the highest compliment you could pay to an actor, is to say that it translates.
It's a very high compliment, thank you. But I do think we had a unique group. That we all got on very well together right from the word go. And this is a magical thing, really, in the theatre, and I suppose in television and in films. You don't always like the people you're acting with, but it doesn't come in, you know. But in this case, we all did like each other, and I think it did show, because many people have said things like that to me over the years.
I think Doctor Who has been very lucky to always find chemistry amongst the actors.
Yes,
starting
I think
with
so.
you set the tone with that, with the chemistry you all had.
Yes, I think that's true.
And it goes to that likability, which lends to the credibility of doing something that's science fiction and can be...
And also the fact that we took it very seriously. I mean, it was a strange thing to do, but we took it very seriously. It was a very serious job. You know, even if it was a comedy or it was the Romans or whatever we were doing, we did take it very seriously.
You have to have some imagination, too, I imagine, to pull off something like that.
Well...
especially in those times with such limited budgets.
Well, so many hiccups and technical stops and bumping into things, and it depended which studio we were in, but at the beginning it was very difficult. With 3 cameras and 5 actors in Studio D, Lime Grove. I don't know, the cameras now have shrunk to this size, you know. They're tiny little things. You can put them anywhere, and you can make a film almost, you know. I have a son who makes films, but he makes films just sort of walking about in life, you know, and things that attract him, and he can photograph them, and it is amazing. But in those days, it was all a sort of a bit of a drama, you know. There was a sort of countdown to go on air, you know, and all that sort of thing, and then once you were on, it was live, of course. It was live television, so it was difficult. Doctor Who was not live, though. Doctor Who was what actually filmed.
But with very few edits.
Yeah.
With very few edits.
You're basically pretending it was live, yeah.
Always a complaint about this, particularly actors who are involved in the fights, like me. I was always involved in the fights.
Well, you were the man of action.
I was the man of action, yes, but I mean, it was awful because they'd come to you and they'd say, you know, we got this fight, the sword, all the things that happen, but you know, we can only afford 2 cuts. So you can imagine, I mean, a normal fight nowadays, 500 cuts in a fight?
Yeah.
Like that.
It's about normal.
It was all supposed to be too expensive, and they couldn't do it. You know.
When, I mean, obviously you didn't assume that the thing was going to be still running 50 years later, but did you get a sense that the show had at least some longevity or a reason to be a hit back when you first started it?
Well, I don't know that it's fair to say that I had an idea about that. I don't think so. I mean, we certainly knew that we had been successful when the Daleks appeared in the Evening Standard, you know, and then it was, you know, we thought we've got a job for as long as we wanted to do it, you know, and so it was good from that point of view. Yes, that was good. But I never imagined that 50 years later I would still be talking about Doctor Who or doing Doctor Who.
Well, so many people are grateful that you came all the way to Los Angeles just so that we could pay our respects and come and see you and appreciate that you were here.
Yes. Well, I've certainly enjoyed it very much, and I've been very gratified that people still enjoy the early Doctor Who's. That's wonderful, and a lot of people have come up to me and said this to me here. So that's pretty good, I think.
Well, I think there's a certain tide from the olden days to the new series today. Do you watch any of the series now?
Yeah, yes, of course.
Yeah,
but I mean, it seems to have changed so much. So much. I mean, you must remember that we were, in a sense, doing a children's television show for children. So we had to be careful with knives and fights and all that kind of thing. So it has changed out of all recognition. Now sometimes I think it's a very adult show.
Yes.
You know, I look at it and I think, my God, it's incredible. Wonderful sets, marvelous actors. It is an amazing performance now, but it's so far away from what we did, I think.
One of my favorite stories is the Crusade, because of the supporting cast that you had in that. I mean, you had just a wealth of talent in that story. Do you have any recollections on the Crusade?
On the
and
Crusade?
being the Knight of Jaffa?
But I don't think I do. Maybe I had a week off or something.
You did actually. It's funny that when I think about, because whenever like Bill Hartnell had a week off, they would just write him out, or Jackie or anything like that. Yeah. But whenever you got a week off, they put you in, filmed about 7 or 10 minute scenes worth. You never got a week off because I mean, Ian was such a vital part of the story, much different so than any companions. Did you sort of sense that you sort of had a kind of a co-lead with William Hartnell in the show?
I didn't feel that, but maybe it's true. You know, maybe there was a good balance, and but there was between all of us there was a very good balance, and we were always very pleased when one of the girls got a really good role, as it were. I mean, I'm thinking of Barbara. Jackie Hill in the Aztecs.
Yes.
She was wonderful.
Fantastic.
Absolutely wonderful. And, you know, very often she didn't have that kind of role. And of course, this was the reason why Carol Ann left early on, because she said, I don't want to spend my life shouting, this way! You know. She couldn't, she wanted to act. And she was very good. But she wasn't going to really give them the opportunity with the scripts, I think.
When the show came back a few years ago, in its first season back, one of the dynamics they used was practically based on the way you did your first season, in that in order for the Doctor to be a pacifist character, one to not have violence, they brought in a character, a man of action, essentially the same dynamic that you had, so that someone could go and do that kind of thing. That's right. And it's so, for me as a fan, I instantly saw that, and the first thing I think of is your dynamic with William Hartnell, that he wasn't the direct hero, you had this action role, and he was allowed to be the person to play off it. So it's so wonderful to see that come back. And
yes, that is true.
The show has grown so much over the years. Do you remember when William Hartnell left and Patrick Troughton took over the role? Were you aware of that at the time?
No, I wasn't. I can't remember what I was doing, but I hadn't really been in touch with the show at all. I have a feeling that I was at the Old Vic, and if that was true, I was busy doing other things, you know.
Such was the life of a jobbing actor, I suppose, back then. You just went from one job to another.
That's right.
Because I would love to know what your opinion would have been, you know, with such a major recasting of essentially your show at that time. It was like, geez, I wonder how this is going to work out. That's it. It's done now.
Yes. But it does work out well.
It does.
It's wonderful. I mean, I think I was full of compliments, really, when I saw it. You know, and I watched it grow, and I think they're wonderful, you know, absolutely wonderful. The Doctor Who's that we do today, that we see today.
It's certainly given it a new legs, and it's just so wonderful that it's come back.
Indeed.
I mean, you can say that's the difference of money to begin with, you know. And you think, oh well, you know, we didn't have that kind of money. We didn't have that kind of support. We didn't have those kind of studios. We didn't have, you know, all the things that they do have now. But I think we still try to make a story really mean what it meant to mean.
And it has a staying power today, quite frankly. I mean, if it wasn't for your era of Doctor Who, none of us in this entire hotel would be here today.
Yes.
Wow, thank you very much.
It's been an incredible honor, William Russell. So from myself and Ken, we thank you for being on the show today.
Well, thank you
so
very much. I feel very humble when you say that.
Well, it's...
No, we're the ones who are humble.
Thank you. Next up, I'm trying to think now when we recorded, because this is back in the day when we put out 5 episodes in a weekend, mostly because we hadn't interviewed anyone before. It was only our 3rd, 4th Gallifrey One by that point, and so like everyone was new to us, and we were so young and hungry, and as I say, access was relatively easy, and the way that it was set up back in those days. And so Waris Hussein was somewhere on the weekend too. I think Richard Senior was another director. There's a bunch of people we interviewed that weekend, but I do remember sitting down with Waris Hussein, of course, director of the first story ever, An Unearthly Child, and Marco Polo, and I look back on it like he's a legend. Damn it! This is, of course, well before An Adventure in Space and Time came about, and so the build-up to the 50th, I think, brought him into even more focus, I think. But he was definitely a very popular guest there in 2012. And see if you can notice that I forgot to press record at the very beginning of the interview, and I had to re-record my first question and intro. And I remember Gary Russell walked by me the exact moment I was doing that. And I was sort of like, acting naturally. So I wouldn't look like I was, in editing, it wouldn't sound like I was just reading it off a card or something. And I was sitting on a chair talking into a microphone opposite an empty chair and being very emotive and asking this question. And Gary Russell just happened to walk by and laughed at me after I had pressed record. Forgot all about that until I listened back to this interview just now, which you will hear now. Waris Hussein from 2012 at Gallifrey One. I am here at Gallifrey One with the legendary first director of Doctor Who, Waris Hussein. Obviously you didn't have any notion of how legendary the show would become, but did you get a sense that it had some staying power?
You know what? I'm going to be very honest. We did not know what we had, partly because the show itself was being made almost as an experiment. Nothing like this had been thought of by the BBC before, and we have to understand the atmosphere under which it was created. The BBC at that time was very conventional and very, in many ways, conservative. This was a total innovation created by a wonderful head of drama at that time called Sidney Newman. Sidney was a Canadian.
Yes, like me.
And
so I'm proud of him, yeah.
Right, so you should be. He's not, to my mind, been given the kind of attention he should be given, or the credit I think that this show should have at the end of every episode created by Sidney Newman. It has not been done, and I consider it an injustice to him. He was the first person I was going to mention as a non-Brit. Verity Lambert, who was the producer, was a Brit, but she was a woman. And she was the very first woman to produce anything of this nature at the BBC. And I was the young, at that time, only East Indian doing what I was doing. So if you add us together as a threesome, we were 3 outsiders. Yeah. And we created what is now turned out to be the most British of all shows. Is that not an irony?
That is. And like both you and Verity were in your 20s at the time, weren't you?
We were indeed, and both very anxious to get things right with what at that time was almost impossible material. When you think about what we were trying to do in a very confined space, the BBC didn't have enough to give us even the facilities we wanted. We were in one of the oldest studios in London,
at Lime Grove, yeah.
Ramshackle, old-fashioned, falling to pieces, with equipment that was equally so. they didn't put us in the spanking new television center because they didn't have any faith. So here we are doing a series about an odd man called Doctor Who lives in a telephone box, and which then turns out to be this huge interior. Imagine all that having been put together by us with very little money. And now, of course, as we know, in hindsight, it is the BBC's biggest cash cow.
Was the budget for it low even by those standards of the day?
If I'm going to guess right, it was in the region of £2,000 an episode.
I'm going to go that slow in any
But
any
if
era.
you translate that into 1963 money, I guess it enlarges a bit more. But even then, even if you enlarge £2,000, it doesn't go very far. And as I was trying to tell people, the first episode was about quest for fire, and a cast of people with the names of Ag and Og, or whatever the kind of monosyllabic dialogue they had to utter.
And stuff, yeah.
We had no money except to put them into flea-bitten skins, and I even had to audition actors and ask them if they had hairy chests, because we couldn't afford to put hair on actors' chests. So that was how poor we were.
Well, what was it like? Were you at least impressed by the first TARDIS set? Because that still wins much praise to this day.
But you know, the first TARDIS set was also put together, was almost prefabricated. Peter Bukaki, the designer, was, I think, look, first of all, you've got to understand, every single one of us, apart from Verity, who'd been brought in from outside, we were very reluctant to get involved. I mean, I was not the first choice for this directorship. It was turned down by various other people who didn't think there was any future in this. So I was the most junior director at the BBC and under contract, and I had no choice. They just said, you're doing it.
Right.
So the same thing happened with everybody involved, the designers. Peter Bukaki was just assigned this against his wishes. He was a reluctant designer on it. And with the money he had available, he came up with this hexagonal set, the main board in the center and the walls. And even Raymond Cusick, who ultimately did the Daleks. I mean, what he designed it from was a sort of upside-down egg cup.
Right.
Because that's the money he had. He didn't know what. He put it on wheels and hoped for the best. So look how iconic that's become.
It's still to this day.
To this day, the Daleks and the police box are the most iconic images of Doctor Who. But all this started very humbly, and to me, this is a miracle. I'm sitting here now, witnessing thousands of people who've been carried away by this. And in answer to your question, did I have any idea whether I knew this would have any longevity? I'd say no. I had no idea what was going to happen to it.
So, explain the feeling I suppose you must have had after you had done the initial recording of it, what's been now called the pilot episode, in between, and then of course having to do it again.
Well, that's another interesting story, because first of all, the BBC did not do pilots.
No.
This was meant to be the first episode, and actually it was a disaster. And Sydney took Verity and me out to dinner and said, look guys, I should by rights be firing both of you, but I'm not going to, because I know you've had a difficult time with this. So I'm going to give you a second chance. We're going to do it again. And that's what happened. The BBC didn't do pilots in those days.
No.
They still don't. So, we did something. We were groundbreaking in many ways. Don't forget, we were actually doing something that not only was innovative, but it was breaking barriers. The main character, Barbara, in it, she wasn't just a simpering, useless female, as was the sort portrayed in most television dramas at the time. She was a feisty woman, and she and Ian, the character, shared equally the adventures, along with Carol Ann Ford, who played Susan, the granddaughter. But there were many innovative things. I think we opened a door to a new age of concept and characters. When we did the second, when we had the chance to do pilot again, of course, we were very relieved because we were able to smooth problems out and get script changes done. And I personally am not happy that the pilot was included in the box set for Doctor Who fans, because it shows all the cracks and problems, and to my mind it looks embarrassingly amateur, but not many people seem to have commented on that fact.
Well, it's a product of the day. I mean, it's a fascinating insight into what could have been.
Yes.
You know.
But we were at least able to do it again. Mm-hmm. And from what I gather, people who've seen the first episode, they still like it. You know, they seem to think it holds.
Well, it's amazing. I watch it I'm a sad Doctor Who fan, and every day on November 23rd, the anniversary of it, I'll watch it. And it still sends shivers up to my and a friend of mine who's seen the new series but has never seen an episode of the classic, I decided I'm gonna show it to her, just to get it, and she was gripped. She
really?
was fully gripped by it. I was really surprised by it, and I mean, obviously that was something you were aiming for, but I mean, are you often surprised by the amount of love that the episode still gets 50 years on?
I'm thrilled, and surprised. I can't say that I'm not surprised, because I had no idea what was going to happen. And to me now, look, it's nearly 50 years since the day, and I can't believe that we have this show that has created such an impression as to have this many followers. I mean, we know there are other shows that have followers, but this seems to be something in itself quite unique. It's a British show. It's something that no one ever thought would reach the heights that it's reached. It's become iconic. In the same way as some of the American shows have happened, Star Trek, etc. Yeah. But they all followed. We were the first into this whole regime of going into the past and the future, the sci-fi thing, the whole concept of the phone box, which to my mind is still unique. It beats all those spaceships,
Because there's many thousand spaceships.
Oh,
only
absolutely.
One TARDIS, yeah.
But only one TARDIS.
You mentioned going to the past and such on the show, too. Unfortunately, your second story is something that we cannot savor. Marco Polo.
Marco Polo.
So how often do you watch the first story because it actually exists? Does that sort of bring back memories for you? And how?
Can I be honest
Yes.
with you? I've never seen it since we did it.
An Unearthed
I've
Child.
got the box set.
Really?
You know what? I can't bring myself to watch it. It's to do with... Oh, gosh. It's like you've had an incredible experience, and repeating it may be a disappointment. I don't know whether that makes sense. If you've had something that you really treasure, I'm glad other people experience it. But for me, it's something that I've put into a little box of memories and appreciate. But you know what? Having said that, I think I will probably see it again. And I've never seen the apparently there's an accompanying bit there with Verity and me talking about it. The additional material.
Yeah.
I've never seen that either.
Really?
So maybe I should treat myself to this.
On the 50th anniversary.
On the 50th anniversary, on the 23rd of November, I'll sit down and look at it. But no, it's an odd thing. I don't know whether... Do parents feel like that when they let their kids go? When the child grows up and leaves home, you memorize when you were bringing them up. But once they've flown the nest, or whatever you describe it as, you have a different way of approaching it. You know what? You have your fond memories, but you don't keep tracking back on it. And that's me, I think. Because Doctor Who, to me, is a child of... I'm very possessive of it. And in a way, I feel when I see other people who are now involved and actively doing it, I almost feel that they've taken my kid away.
Right.
And I don't like it. I feel, well, you've taken on what I created, and good luck, but... I feel, I don't know, it's very complex, isn't it? It's a complex way of looking at something that one never thought would go where it's reached.
Right.
But I enjoy what happens like this situation where we can sit and discuss it. Mm-hmm. Or like on this particular event, I've been able to reunite with William Russell, who I'm very fond of as a person. We got on so well as colleagues, creating a show. So it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be able to reminisce like we did today in front of a huge audience, most of whom were not even born at the time. Mm-hmm. So think of that for a minute. It's an amazing phenomenon.
Oh, I know. It's. I mentioned Marco Polo. The fact that it doesn't exist then anymore I suppose that's almost beneficial for your view of it, because then no one can see it.
Marco Polo. Well, they have made it up into a sort of series of images with a soundtrack.
It came from you, oddly enough, because
because they were my pictures.
Yeah,
they used my pictures, which I used to commission from a guy called John Cura.
Yes,
and they used to print them in sequence. In those days, there were no video, of course. No, Marco Polo I try not to think about, because again it's enormous sadness. Mm-hmm. It was a wonderful piece of writing on the part of John Lucarotti. I think I did a fairly good job on it, and set-wise it looked incredible. It had the most fabulous sets within the limits of the Studio D confines, that dreadful studio. Mm-hmm. But Barry Newbury, who designed it, did the most fabulous sets. Mm-hmm. And the final set of the Court of Kublai Khan, it was just magic. And I learned so much because we're dealing with illusions. It's a question of what you put on camera and how you shoot it and how you see it. And it taught me so much about what you can do with the least amount of fuss and also without extravagance, and yet to the point. Mm-hmm. So I'm very proud of it. But alas, it's not available in the way we would like it to be. Somewhere, there may be in a vault a version of it.
You never know.
As I said jokingly, whoever finds it could be very rich.
Perhaps that person will be you. Waris Hussein, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And lastly, Philip Segal, executive producer of the Doctor Who TV movie, and a very tall person. I did not know how tall he was until Chris and I, waiting in the hallway, saw him come down the hall towards the green room, and I realized then, like, I think he's just ever so slightly taller than me. I'm 6'4", I think he was 6'5", Chris is 6'10", so I was the shortest person in that group. Maybe it's his Americanness. I mean, he is of transatlantic origin. He sort of grew up in the UK and then moved to the US, but I can sense no any sense of UK accent in his voice now. But he was just a very much, okay, let's do it. Like, I remember Chris went into the green room as he went in there. I sort of got set up under the hopes that maybe we could get an interview with him, like, right then and there. And he was like, yeah, sure. Like, literally, he just arrived at the convention, and he goes into the green room and says, sure, let's do an interview right now. And so I'd sort of queued up, so what's it like reminiscing with everyone? And then realizing, as you hear, that he hadn't seen anyone, basically. So a very interesting fellow, though, and a very fun chat with Philip Segal, producer of the 96 TV movie. We're here, Chris, myself,
we're Canadian.
We're Canadian, yeah. Chris,
and I won't hold that against you.
Chris, nice and polite.
Chris, myself, and executive producer of the 96 Doctor Who TV movie here, the also very tall Philip Segal. Yes. I'm now officially the smallest person in this podcast recording.
Right. I think you can actually average height, which I think is...
average height, 6'4" is about average height?
Very fair.
Is that how it's going to be?
Exactly. I think you should be proud of being average height. It's better in life, believe me.
Well, I suppose so. Philip, you are here. There's a whole great celebration of the 96 TV movie here with yourself and the original cast. I mean, what's it been like to sort of relive
memories with.
Well, I haven't seen everybody. I haven't had a chance to see everybody yet. I've seen Yiji and Paul, of course. I haven't seen Daphne, and I don't know if Eric is coming.
He's here. Well, I'll phrase it this way: are you looking forward to perhaps reminiscing about
Eric? Eric and I are fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Eric was a full-time job on the movie, but we had a chance to talk about it much later on and cleared the air.
Right.
But he's a good man. He's a good man. No, it's great to see. What I'm excited about is the fact that when I first started coming to this convention, there were probably 200, barely 200 people. Now, you see all of these people. It's wonderful. It's wonderful for science fiction. It's wonderful for Doctor Who. And to see this many people here, it's terrific. It's good to know that there's still fans out there for science fiction, because it's very important.
Your story is outlined in a great documentary called The 7-Year Hitch, which is on the DVD release for the movie,
right?
Which is 55 minutes long. I don't think there's been a more convoluted history in getting one episode of Doctor Who to air. Is there any way that you can sum up in 2 to 4 minutes of what the actual process was from the very start when you got interested in it to it finally getting made?
Well, it was a passion project from the very beginning. I sat on my grandfather's knee and watched the very first episode, Unearthly Child, and of Doctor Who that was ever produced, and with William Hartnell, and it was an obsession ever since for me. And so when I actually started producing, it was something that was very passionate. And I thought it would be a relatively easy process, because I thought, well, here's a project or a format that's really going into the mothballs, and they won't care. And little did I know that I opened up a can of worms and caused all kinds of problems. In a nutshell, it was simply because at the time the BBC was moving on from its old formats, and it didn't want to invest any more time or any more money in something they perceived to be the past. And there was a bunch of curmudgeons running it at the time who really did not embrace science fiction, hated Doctor Who. And the last thing they were going to do was to invest any funds in producing anything that had Doctor Who on the label. It was also at a time when their distribution arm, which at the time was called Enterprises, became BBC Worldwide, was splitting off from the mothership, and so it had to self-sustain itself. And they were so caught up in their culture and their bureaucracy that the rights became completely fractured. So one couldn't do it without the other, and it just became a living nightmare. So I just decided to be a dog with a bone, and I would just literally, I would wear them down until they had to say yes. And that's the story in a nutshell.
In a gist, but there's Amblin Entertainment's involved, and Paramount eventually. Like, how did the?
Well, that was because I was moving from job to job, and so as I moved from job to job, I would re-energize the attempt. It started when I was at Columbia. But we got close at Amblin. But the script that was written by John Leakley, Stephen felt was just too close to the
Indiana Jones.
Raiders franchise at that time, and so he backed out of it. I've spoken to him since about it. He would have a very different opinion today.
Right.
He wouldn't have. I don't think he would have done that then. But we did get it made eventually.
At what point did you, when you sort of I'd like to make Doctor Who, did you have a story in mind what you wanted to do with it, like from the outset, like what kind of show you wanted to make it, or that you wanted to make it?
It was, to me, it was about the character. It was always about the character, and it was always about the mythology. I was always hoping to find a good writer to partner with, to flesh out what that story should be. I did want to. Always wanted to stay true to all of the mythology, but I wanted to build on it and grow it. But to me, it was always about the character.
I find that a lot of science fiction in the mid-'90s, like Star Trek fandom, had sort of really taken hold of even the franchise itself, and was almost driving it in a way, and that fans wouldn't stand for lack of continuity or anything like that. Did that sort of enter your mind? Because I mean, the when it finally came to being, the TV movie starts with the Seventh Doctor. Like, were you hell bent on making it connect directly to the original BBC series?
Well, I was, because we always had the intention of carrying on, that it was an extension of the mythology. I thought it would have been a very bad idea to pretend like that mythology didn't exist. I mean, that was, at that time, it was almost, it must have been well over 700 episodes when I did the Doctor Who movie. So to pretend that didn't exist, or to just walk away from it, I thought was a bad idea. It should stand on its own, and it needed to stand on its own, but I never wanted to pretend that the past hadn't existed. I also, it's interesting you talk about Star Trek phenomenon, and the fans, just like Doctor Who, the fans kept it alive. Without the fans, it would not be there. And the interesting thing about that is for years and years and years, Paramount made no merchandise attached to Star Trek, and the fans did. And they realized one day that they had literally lost over $2 billion in income from merchandising alone, just by ignoring the fact that they could merchandise it, license it, and actually take advantage of it as a business.
In the 90s, I mean, Lucas did that 20 years prior, and that's...
Well, he was a visionary. He's a visionary, and he also understands that there's connective tissue to these things. He's one of those rare people who understand that it's not just about a product. It's about a world. And it's about embracing that world. And so many executives who are in charge of the checkbook never embrace that. And that's one of the biggest things that is dismaying about our business. Is there's a lot of book smart people, but not a lot of people who really understand the mythology of these things.
Right, and that probably affected you, because you were initially, of course, trying to start a whole series.
Yes.
At what point, like, what did you originally have in mind for like a 13 episode or 20 episode series when you first had this idea that you're going to do Doctor Who?
Well, originally what we wanted to do was we really wanted to embrace the idea that here is a character who is alone in the universe, running from what we don't know. And so we always wanted to try to tap into that part of the storytelling. What was he running from? Why was he really running? And what was he afraid of? What did he know and not know? And that was going to bring him sort of closer to and connect to a lot of characters and a lot of worlds that we know because they are in his universe, and new ones as well. But that was the heart and soul of it. It really was. It really was trying to sort of get into the DNA of who he really was, where he was from, and why he was running.
So how much pull and give and take did it? And Sylvester McCoy's involved is what I'm getting at here, and that he's in there for basically the first 15 or 20 minutes, because it's interesting that the BBC themselves didn't want him in there. So you were fighting for something that the BBC should have been for.
It was touch and go till weeks before.
Really?
Weeks. It was touch and go. It was a big no. Almost. In fact, when the first draft of the script came out, and they just rejected it, and they just kept rejecting it, and I just kept saying no. I mean, there was so many cooks in that kitchen. I mean, originally, Universal didn't want the TARDIS they said, well, who's going to know what that is? Who? You know, I said, what does that have to do with the price of tea in China? You know, it's a prop. It's in the background. It's part of the world. But why do you care one way or another? It was really interesting. It's like, well, no, make it something else. It was unbelievable.
Because they had no idea what they were...
They didn't care.
Yeah.
It was just, you know, this sort of crazy guy who, you know, was a little more arrogant than I am now about all kinds of things. I've been humbled by a lot. But, it was just simply, they put minders on me. That's why there's two other producers credited on
Joe
the front
Wright
of it.
Well,
Joe Wright from the BBC. Then there was Alex Beaton, I think, and there was another. I mean, they piled on the minders because they just thought, well, I'm going to go out of control, and you know, just a crazy guy, and you know, so. But
well, I mean, you'd certainly had a proven track record with Sequest and all that by that point.
Well, I had, but it didn't matter because it was the whole deal was really driven by the fact that a wonderful guy by the name of Bob Greenblatt, who's now running NBC, was behind it, and it was a good friend and supported me at Fox, and he was at Fox, and then the TV movie department, Trevor Walton, who was British, embraced this as well, and they were driving it. So to Universal at the time, you have to understand it was a piece of IP. Mm-hmm. It was, you sold something. You know, the man in charge, Tom Thayer, lovely man, don't get me wrong, but at the time it was like it was not a business for him that he wanted to be in, and sci-fi at the time wasn't selling, but it was a piece of business, and it was sold, and he couldn't believe it was sold. So he's not going to turn down a deal.
Yeah.
You know, it didn't matter what it was a piece of IP. It was something to put in the library, and it looked good on the books.
That's fat. I mean, we just talked to Waris Hussein before this, directed the very first episode ever. I don't know, as a child, the one that you watched when you were a kid, and it's amazing how the BBC basically threw the thing to them, to a young Indian director and a female producer, just to sort of say, go run and play. And now the fact that 30 years later there was so much red tape tying up its development. I mean, the TV industry had obviously changed that much.
It was, but that was one of the greatest thrills of my life, by the way, was when I was prepping the film. I had a wonderful conversation with Verity Lambert, and it was wonderful. Yeah, it was a wonderful conversation for a lot of reasons. Primarily because it was really artist to artist, kind of talking about the business and the mechanics of what it takes to put something together and manage it, and just hear how she had to fight through that bureaucracy as well. So we kind of had a kinsmanship in that regard.
You kind of bonded over it. Yeah, that sort of thing. The movie itself, the actual on-screen product, has been controversial in some way, just because there's a kiss between the Doctor and companion, which was huge at the time.
Sure.
And now it's one of those things that just gets sort of brushed over in the new series. I mean, did you feel that you were sort of breaking new ground, and you sort of gratified that it's because of that and that happened in the TV
I didn't
movie?
at the time. No, again, it was about the character. You know, he was half human. Mm-hmm. Why shouldn't he have emotions that are human emotions? Why shouldn't he embrace those things that are a part of the very fabric of who we are? It's humanity.
Right.
And I think to not have that kiss was to say that he was not embracing the human side of his humanity. And again, it was a part of exploring that character in a very rich way, because why should it be taboo to sort of get inside this guy's head and really get a sense of who he is.
Mm-hmm. And certainly the half-human aspect doesn't bring selling it.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, as years go on, I find that the 96 TV movie just sort of seems like a natural step almost from the end of the original BBC run to the new series. Are you sort of gratified at how much it's sort of, as we look back on it, it's gotten a lot more popular perhaps in people's eyes?
Well, I am. I'm thrilled. I mean, the new series is brilliant. I mean, it's beautifully produced and it's beautifully written, and so it's in wonderful hands. And I'm always going to be pleased that I had and honored that I had an opportunity to be part of that mythology, and that's all. You know, it's these things. They pass from generation to generation and from hand to hand, and artists have a chance to put their own stamp on it. But I'm just glad I had a chance to be a part of it.
When Fox bailed on it after it wasn't as big a success as they'd hoped, was that it for you, or?
Well, they would kill for a 9 rating today. 9
right.
shares. By the way, that would have been a mega hit today.
Uh-huh.
They consider a 4 a hit today, but. Look, I had spent a long time trying to put it on the screen. I had done it. It was it. BBC Wales did come to me originally and asked me if I would be involved.
Really?
But that was very early on. But it wasn't. I had done my bit. Mm-hmm. It was time to pass the baton to someone else. You win some and you lose some, and I was just, as I said, glad to be a part of what I was able to do.
Philip Segal, thank you very much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Hope you enjoyed those. It's been such fun reminiscing and looking back, and just honestly hearing the live, the main stage foofara on the background, especially during the Waris Hussein one and the Segal interview. It's really made me miss Gallifrey One. It hasn't hit me until sort of going back into these and listening to the interviews again. How much the lack of a Gallifrey One this weekend is kind of hitting me, and perhaps all of us, because I'm just recording these in the days leading up to it being released on the podcast feed. On the Sunday, all things being told, we will have Sean Lyon on the show. Of course, the head of Gallifrey One, the head, heart and soul as well. Who's having a very different weekend for the first time in 32 years this weekend. So he's on the show, but also we are presenting some archive interviews with Freema Agyeman from 2013, Garrick Hagan, Canadian content, who was, of course, in a couple Doctor Who episodes. He appeared in 2015. It's one of my favorite interviews. Maybe just the Canadian connection. I don't know what it was. Just hearing a Canadian accent on a podcast to do with Doctor Who was quite enticing to me. Howard Burton, who was a very entertaining interview, is the costume designer from Peter Capaldi's time on Doctor Who, and then Jamie Childs and Wayne Yip together at a signing in the autograph room, the dealer's room in 2019. I sat in between them, and basically as one would sign autographs and chat with fans, I would interview one, and then the other would be talked to, and I would go back to the other person. So it's a very off-the-cuff and a much more recent version of an RFS interview from the convention gone by. So that's all coming on Sunday on episode 785, as we look back through the Gallifrey's One of the past. So until next time, I am Stephen Leviton. So long for now.
You've been listening to Radio Free Skaro. Find us online at radiofreeskaro.com. Follow us on Twitter and Tumblr at Radio Free Skaro. Subscribe to us on iTunes and donate to the show at patreon.com/Radio Free Skaro. Thank you.